it gives me a good opportunity to illustrate what I'm here to talk to you about. So I think that we can agree that everything I say from here on out will also apply to myself. I'm going to make a small caveat. That asterisk up there will appear whenever there's going to be a GIF on the following slide as a trigger warning for flashing visuals. All right, so I'm Gabby. I work at the Financial Times. We are the world's leading news organization in business and economic affairs. I have been very lucky to work in a company that values its culture very strongly, because it means that the people that work there care about the people that work there, which makes it a very good environment to learn and develop in, both personally and professionally. I work specifically in a team called Origami. We are the FT's component library. And our main purpose is to make other people's work easier. Our users are developers with various different backgrounds that work for various different FT products, and those FT products have various different users. So our responsibility is to make sure that our components are clear in both their functionality and their documentation. One of the ways in which we do this is by maintaining a public registry that houses information on all of the components that we own and develop, and it provides demos to assist others in the documentation. So at the beginning of last year, we rewrote and redesigned the registry. And when we launched it, we decided to get a cake, because we were like, yeah, celebration, and everybody loves cake. So we thought it would be a good thing to be like, come use our new product. So I figured I'd use that opportunity to ask for feedback about our new product. And I wrote on the cake box, for cake slice, please to leave nice feedback on post-it note. I thought I was being charming. See, there it is, I did it. And we did get feedback. And the feedback was on the cake. So it's pretty amusing. People get creative when it's on demand. But it really didn't give me what I had asked for, because I assumed that people knew what I was talking about. And in reality, we had been working on the registry for quite a while, so my team knew why there was cake. Everybody else saw very delicious, chocolatey, and most importantly, free cake, which is fair. But this brings me to something that I'm going to say a few times throughout this talk, and it's something that I'd like to highlight. It's very easy to forget that others don't know what we know, and that we don't know what others know. At one point or another, I believe we all make assumptions that we believe to be inoffensive, and because of what we don't know, those assumptions can be harmful to our interactions. So I'm going to talk about a few aspects of our industry where we likely assume, starting with error messages. Yay, get it? Error, you and me. Anyway, sorry. So I skipped ahead. I'll venture a guess that nobody really wants to see error messages, but they can be very useful. So secretly, we may be grateful for them when they make sense. So when they do make sense, they have the ability to help us learn from the mistakes that we make and potentially improve our code. When they don't make sense, one of possibly two things can happen. So first, we've seen the error or its type before, and we can have a guess at what went wrong. We can assimilate from our past. And the odds are that this is going to sink a potentially unnecessary amount of time into debugging that error, because we didn't have the information to get straight to the point. Oprah is a lot darker on that screen than she is on mine. Or we don't understand the error, and the wording in the message makes us feel bad about something that we've done. Yeesh. Like so. So I think we can feel like we simply don't know how the language works, or we possibly feel embarrassed that we don't understand the error or what we've done wrong. And neither one of those things do very much for our belief in our own capability. And related to that, I asked IE to let me share this tweet because it really struck me when I first read it. So as tool builders, we're gatekeepers. Every time we print an incomprehensible error message, someone decides they're not good enough at coding. And I've been working in this industry for a few years, but I can relate to this pretty strongly because I frequently come across error messages that really make me feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. So they also make my faith in what I think I understand pretty wobbly. So what I want to focus on today is point number 2, when the error messages make us feel bad. I want to highlight some of the problems that exist with the ways in which error messages are communicated. And I've picked a few examples to illustrate my point, but this will apply to other error messages that you've seen out in the wild. So let's begin. Type error undefined is not a function. A big problem that we have here is ambiguity. To one extent or another, all of the error messages that I'm going to show you are ambiguous. They're not specific about what's gone wrong, and the wording implies that the reader knows where to start if they see this error. And this might be true for some, which is fine, but it's also entirely possible that other people don't know where to begin. And here, the message is being ambiguous by not telling us what undefined is referencing. Now, I'll make a small caveat. A lot of browsers have implemented referencing systems, but it doesn't detract from the point that this still happens with other errors. Uncaught error, object, object. So good. If anybody knows how to debug this, please tell me. I need to know how to fix this problem. Big issue that we have here is succinctness. In most cases, unhelpful error messages are short. They may be short and to the point for some, but it's also entirely possible that the point is missed by others. And I don't mean we need to write a very long novel with all of the gory details about the error, but a sentence or two could help us get to the point. And whatever the error is in this case, it's been shrunk down to 2 generally unhelpful words. And my favorite, unexpected token, comma, expected, comma. It doesn't even look like a real sentence. So a big problem that we have here is obfuscation. And this is similar to ambiguity. The specifics of what have gone wrong have been hidden away somewhere, and useful information is being withheld, which is going to complicate things from the beginning. In this example, logically, a comma is a comma, so I have no idea what's actually gone wrong, and I have no information to know where to begin to figure that out. So I want to reiterate what I'm saying by creating an imaginary scenario for you. Picture yourself at the entrance of a hedge maze in daylight. There are no threats in this maze, and your objective is to get to the heart of it. Whenever you get lost, a mystical boulder with instructions will materialize. So you step into the maze. After a few right turns and a few wrong turns, you have lost your sense of direction. And all of a sudden, you see that mystical boulder. And on close inspection, it has a single sentence etched into it. And it says, "Turn north." And this is how I feel when I'm trying to understand a message that I just can't identify with. So next time we write an error message, let's try to keep the following in mind. Clarity to counter ambiguity, context to counter ambiguity. Have we provided a connection between the problem and what's causing it? Elaboration to counter succinctness. Have we been sufficiently verbose about our error? Have we provided relevant details about the problem? And clarity. Overall, is our message clear? Have we surfaced all of the things that are important about this error? And I've raised these points to aid us in moving away from general assumptions that can be made about our reader's understanding. And this will allow us to make our wording as inclusive as possible. So these points not only apply to our error messages, but they apply to our documentation as well. Which brings me to the README. Very often, the README is the single point of reference that our users have about a project. It is where all of our documentation could possibly live. And it's important that we are aware of the information that we convey and how we convey it. And I bragged a little bit about how cool it is to work in my company at the beginning, but it's so that I can say that we make mistakes too. This is a public repository that belongs to the FT. And this is all that's in it. And I want everyone to focus on this part of it, most importantly. I have many questions. What is this library? What's wrong with installing it globally? What package manager am I meant to use? What is NPT5? What is this acronym? And most importantly, who is this for? First off, this README assumes that everybody knows where this library should be used. So there's no context. It gives you a warning about installation instructions, about installation, but no installation instructions. And ultimately, there's no explicit explanation for what this library actually does, so there's no clarity. The fact is, this project assumes that you work at the FT, that you're familiar with our workflow, and that you know how everything fits together. And this may be true for some, especially maybe if you work on that project, but if you've just joined the company, regardless of your level of experience, you may not know. But fortunately, we can raise these things in-house, and we've changed this README to look a little bit more like this. So we've specified. We've specified what this project is used for, and we've provided further information for anyone that might need it or want it. Not only were our installation instructions vague, they were 2 years out of date, which is, great. So we've elaborated and we've provided an explicit installation command. And we've omitted abbreviations and provided a little bit more information. So overall, we've been more explicit about the functionality of the project, and we've been more clear. We've facilitated other people's use of it. And I know that there's a lot more that can go into a README and should probably go into a README. It doesn't fit into one slide, and that would probably be another 25 minutes. So moving swiftly on. Even though we don't have time to go through all those things right now, remembering to supply context, elaborate where relevant, and provide clarity will help us improve the way in which we write. Yet, writing isn't the only way in which we communicate in this industry. We talk a lot too, right? That's why you're all here, to listen to me talk. So in addition to what we've covered so far, the next, equally as important point is, who is your audience? And I can't really stress this enough. I can knock the mic over though. Who are we speaking to, and who are we writing for? Everyone in this audience has a different spectrum of experience and understanding. So when we talk to someone from our version of the spectrum, we talk through the filters of our own experience. And it's important to remember that they are our own experiences. And conversely, the person we are talking to has a spectrum all of their own, which is made up of their experiences. So if we want to have a good exchange, we need to find common ground together, instead of assuming there is common ground. And we probably don't intend it badly when we assume that someone will know what we're talking about, and hey, maybe they do. But it's better to make ourselves clear from the very beginning. And there are a few things that we can do to improve our communication. First, we can start by acknowledging that we do make these mistakes, that we do assume. This means that we can begin to notice the things that we can improve. Second, when we're talking about something, we should work to elaborate without judgment. It takes some practice, for sure, but it's important to learn to provide more information rather than to assume that the person that you're talking to knows what you're talking about. I found myself in a few situations occasionally where I'm talking about something and I'm completely confident that it makes perfect sense, and then I look at the person I'm talking to and they look like this. And I know that I've had this face on quite a few times, and it's probably because I didn't get that elaboration, it's probably because I didn't get a little bit of context, I didn't understand the jargon, it could have been any number of things. But just elaborating isn't enough. We need to pay attention to how we say what we say. We understand the world through the words we read, through the words we hear, and through the words we use, so we should consider that very carefully. In this case, it doesn't matter who you're talking to, but the words you choose to speak with are really far from inconsequential. Which brings me to a few examples of language that we could learn to avoid. Commentary like, you would be crazy to think, you would be blind not to notice. This is ableist. It's ableist and it's alienating if you do think in a particular way or if you didn't notice something, whether or not you have a disability. And it's degrading language, so please leave this out. Words and phrasing like, all you need to do, just, obviously, clearly, simply. They trivialize what may not be obvious or clear to someone else. And in reality, they're filler words, so we can leave these out too. And finally, everyone knows, any developer worth their salt. There are examples of crude generalizations that can be exclusionary. And we've already covered that we don't know what others know. So setting arbitrary benchmarks about somebody's understanding or worth is pretty harmful. So make sure we leave these out as well. Give your interactions your full attention. That's a big dog. With that, we can start picking up on the things that we say. We may use some of the language that I've just talked about unconsciously. I know that I do. But the beauty in interacting with somebody else is that it's a two-way channel. So we can make it known that we welcome the opportunity to learn from our mistakes with the people that we make those mistakes with. We can ask questions about the content of our conversations, and we can provide our listeners with the chance to correct us when we may have gone wrong and may not have noticed. And when we do ask those questions and we provide those opportunities, there's benefit in it for us as well. We can take that chance to learn about what our assumptions were in that scenario, and we can begin to correct ourselves when we notice that our language has slipped. With these points in mind, we can go into our conversations with more awareness, we can make them more productive, more effective, and more inclusive. And I'd like to stress that this is a learning process. It takes practice, and we will probably make mistakes throughout that process. But it doesn't cost us anything to try, and we lose nothing by making the effort. So if we practice acknowledging our assumptions, elaborating without judgment, asking questions, and paying attention to the words we use, we'll be benefiting from richer and more constructive conversations going forward. I'm pouring a lot of information and energy into talking about assumptions and how they may be negative things, but to a large extent, assumptions are also simplifications that make our life possible. So if we imagine, for example, that we're walking along the street you're pedestrian, all good. You're assuming that the driver isn't going to drive up in front of you. The drivers are assuming you're not going to jump out in front of them. If you had to stop and ask every driver to make sure that that was the case, nobody would ever get anywhere. And it would be equally unrealistic to try and have an answer for every possible situation we find ourselves assuming in. Which really begs the question, once you start, where do you stop? And the correct answer is that there is no correct answer. Ultimately, we don't have the brain power or the time to come up with a solution for every scenario we might find ourselves assuming in. But we can lay the foundations for the word choices that we make in our errors, in our documentation, and in our speech, which can help us cover a lot of ground where we can't cover every eventuality. Which, for the last time, brings me back to, we don't know what others know, and others don't know what we know. So in all types of communication, let us strive to provide context, to elaborate freely, to convey clarity, to be aware of the words that we communicate with, and to ask so that we can apply what we learn to ourselves. With that, we'll be setting ourselves up for better interactions going forward, and we'll be at a huge advantage. Finally, I'd like to leave you with a quote from American novelist Ursula Le Guin. Words transform both speaker and hearer. They feed energy back and forth and amplify it. They feed understanding or emotion back and forth and amplify it. Remember, the goal is not to make an ass out of anyone. So thank you for listening to me.